radical left has taken over the Democratic Party.
Hello and welcome to Think Progressively, covering politics and all the other chaos life has to offer. This is episode 123, recorded on Friday, May 10th from Milwaukee. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jason.
And on today's episode, I didn't even see this. God damn it. And on today's episode, we take a break from our latest rap beef to delve into the topic of wage theft, which costs American workers an estimated $50 billion a year.
Drake.
I concur. But first, the headlines.
I got along with him well. Although he did announce the other day that he'd much rather see Biden as president. And I agree with him. I agree.
First up in headlines, we're going to give you an update on the situation in Gaza. First up, we had a U.S. report on Israeli war crimes in Gaza that was set to be released by the State Department, has now been delayed indefinitely.
Cool. It's great.
The State Department has been working for months on the report, which will issue a determination on whether Israel has violated international humanitarian law since the war in Gaza began. If so, the U.S. would be expected to stop sending Israel military assistance. On Monday night, 185 lawyers, including 27 currently in the Biden administration, sent a letter to top U.S. officials saying that sending weapons to Israel is illegal, according to a copy of the letter obtained by Politico.
I mean, I just had to defend the idea earlier this week again, and we talked about this in earlier episodes, that if Trump was in office, it would be worse. Biden's making my job a lot harder, and it's annoying the hell out of me. I mean, and we'll talk more about what Biden's going to say in a second here, but like, what do you say to this? I think we had something similar to this with the Trump administration, and we lost our minds about it, correctly, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, this is blatantly putting your thumb on the scale.
For the worst reasons possible.
Mm-hmm. And it's to protect war crimes, to protect a genocide that's going on currently in the world, and the U.S. is helping it happen. And yeah, it's very hard to push people away from that idea that this is so bad that they cannot vote for Joe Biden in November. And while I'm still opposed to that sentiment, and I think we'll get into that a little bit later in this headline, but it is very difficult to come up with an argument against that idea.
Did you see the new Macklemore video?
The Free Palestine. I have a rule against listening to Macklemore ever since my wife made me listen to that thrift shop song. So I didn't listen to it. I saw some reporting on it. I saw some of the lyrics. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad he's doing it.
You should. It's actually pretty damn good. I mean, granted, again, I think the only thing I disagreed with it was him saying, F you Biden, no, I'm not going to vote for you in November. But man, I get the emotional sentiment. Mm-hmm. I really do. And it's just so difficult to make the argument over and over again that people need to vote for Joe Biden when he is clearly mishandling this entire situation and is making the situation worse with each passing day. So what has Biden been actually doing, though? Well, Biden recently gave a press conference and speech for Holocaust Remembrance Day. In it, he condemned the anti-Semitism sparked by college protests in the Gaza war, as Jews around the world still cope with the atrocity and trauma of that day and its aftermath. We've seen a ferocious surge of anti-Semitism in America and around the world. Not 75 years later, but just 7.5 months later, and people are already forgetting. They're already forgetting that Hamas unleashed this terror and that it was Hamas that brutalized Israelis, that it was Hamas that took and continues to hold hostages. I have not forgotten, nor have you, and we will not forget. And look.
Yeah, they're not pro-Hamas rallies.
Well, first off, I don't expect him to do the both sides thing at a Holocaust remembrance speech. I understand that. But you are correct. The idea that we've already addressed this in our Is the Left Anti-Semitic episode. This is a complete mischaracterization of the protests that are happening around the country right now. And not just around the country, but the entire world.
Yeah, it's not an issue of forgetting what happened on October 7th. The issue is, was that carried out by every Palestinian civilian? If not, then why is Israel seemingly targeting and killing every Palestinian civilian? That's the issue. There were, 1,200 Israelis killed and 250 taken hostage, and so far we're talking about at least 35,000 Palestinians being killed, most of them children. That's the issue.
It was almost a half or 2/3 children.
Mm-hmm. And that's even just ignoring the apartheid state that has been set up in Israel for years in the occupation of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And in finally maybe some positive news in this story, the Biden administration says that it plans to halt some arms supplies if Israel invades Rafah.
Which they're already right at the doorstep.
They essentially are. It's not what Biden considers invading Rafah, but basically Rafah is the southernmost city in Gaza and borders Egypt. It has a population of 1.4 million Palestinians, and those numbers have swelled with refugees after Israel began bombing Gaza in retaliation for the October 7th attack. So it's literally one of the only functioning cities in Gaza, one of the only places that refugees can go. So it is where a lot of them have gone. And it's where Israel has told refugees to go before they were bombing the rest of Gaza. And Joe Biden has asked Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to avoid a full ground invasion of Rafah without a plan to protect civilians. Israel has begun invading southern Rafah, and they have cut off supply routes and access to Egypt. We have a quote from the UNICEF Senior Emergency Coordinator in the Gaza Strip, Hamash Young. For 5 days, no fuel and virtually no humanitarian aid entered the Gaza Strip, and we are scraping the bottom of the barrel. So what the plan is from the U.S. is future shipments of some types of offensive munitions have been delayed, and this has sparked uproar among Israeli officials.
Yeah, I believe it was something along 300 bombs, I think, were officially delayed.
A future shipment that is not even supposed to have been shipped yet is being delayed because of the invasion of Rafah. We are still sending money and weapons for defense.
Correct.
But we are just limiting offensive weapons because of this dispute over the invasion of Rafah.
And this also comes in conjunction of Biden doing that interview where he even admitted saying that U.S. weapons were being used in Gaza to kill civilians.
Correct. In response, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Israel will stand alone if needed in a bizarre interview that he did with Dr. Phil, of all people.
What?
Yes, he gave an exclusive hour-long interview.
I can't keep up with this
Dr.
news, man.
Phil.
What is happening?
We have a couple tweets from Israeli officials. The Minister of National Security of Israel, Itamar Ben-Gvir, tweeted, "Hamas heart Biden."
Cool. Thanks, buddy.
Israel Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich tweeted, and this is translated from Hebrew, "And we must continue this war until victory, despite, and to some extent precisely because of the opposition of the Biden administration and the halting of arms shipments. We simply have no other choice that does not endanger our existence and security."
So again, literally the whole idea is just to wipe Gaza off the map.
Yes.
That's all it is. That's all it has been. And again, I have to go back to the statements and sentiments, and even with this stupid Ben-Gvir tweet, everyone already knows and acknowledges that the most recent conflicts were started because of October 7th with Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
We know that, and we acknowledge that. But then don't you dare try to gaslight us by saying, oh, this is just a defensive measure, when you're going in slaughtering tens of thousands of innocent civilians, and you don't stop for anything. I mean, even as of right now, negotiations have been breaking down because Israel does not want a permanent ceasefire, while Hamas wants a permanent ceasefire.
They had agreed in principle on ceasefire conditions.
Except for the time frame.
And their meetings in Egypt, and Israel rejected that.
Yes, literally because all they want is a temporary ceasefire while Hamas wants a permanent ceasefire.
And in the middle of those negotiations, Israel invaded Rafah, which then that destroyed the negotiations. And the representatives have both, at this point, left Egypt. We also have former Israeli ambassador to the UN and current member of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, Danny Danon, in an interview with MSNBC, accused the U.S. of failing to stand with its ally in a war.
That's
so again,
so messed
this
up,
is
man.
all just in reaction to saying, we're going to halt a future shipment of certain types of offensive weapons because we don't want them used in your attack on Rafah because you don't have a plan to protect civilians. Oh, look at the U.S. failing to stand with its allies.
They love Hamas. They love terrorism.
We have given, even not including this war at all, we have given Israel billions of dollars every single year for their defense, for their growth as a nation. Israel does not exist without the United States and other allies as a nation. Like, it doesn't exist at all. That's indisputable. Without the United Nations creating the state of Israel. And Israel does not exist as a nation situated where it is, with a bunch of countries that were upset that all of that land was given to Israel and the way they've been treating the Palestinians this entire time, without them getting all of the weaponry and technology and money from specifically the United States, but also lots of other Western countries. And for them to then say, you're not standing with us because we don't want to give them bombs to use to kill more civilians in Rafah is just ridiculous. And to go to your earlier point of not being able to get across to people how this would be worse with Donald Trump or really any other Republican in the presidency currently, we have some quotes from some of the top Republican officials. Mitch McConnell was briefly raised from the dead long enough to give the quote, "For the administration to withhold assistance from Israel is devastating in its own right. At home, it will only whet the appetite of the anti-Israel left."
What?
Which is ridiculous. "And abroad, it will embolden Iran and its terrorist proxies." Yes, historically, it's the left that has been anti-Israel, Joe, not the neo-Nazi friendly right.
I'm just going to go back to, 2017, where Trump said there were fine people on both sides when they were literally marching in the streets saying the Jews will not replace us.
Mm-hmm. And Nick Fuentes is a right-wing figure and a neo-Nazi. Richard Spencer, very leftist-leaning people here that are all...
I mean, for God's sake, it's a meme that Marjorie Taylor Greene talks about Jewish space lasers, for God's sakes.
All of the pro-Nazi supporters of Ron DeSantis that we saw at his rallies. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. We also have Lindsey Graham. "If we stop weapons necessary to destroy the enemies of the state of Israel at a time of great peril, we will pay a price. This is obscene. It is absurd. Give Israel what they need to fight the war they can't afford to lose."
They're doing it. What are you... This is such a one-sided war. What are you talking about?
We need to kill all of the civilians in Rafah, and the fact that Joe Biden doesn't want to so obviously provide the weapons that will kill the civilians in Rafah, the Republicans cannot abide by that. They think the same way that the ultra-right-wing government of Israel does. They have to get everything they ask for in order to carry out this genocide from the United States. They're on the same page with that. And that's going to be the difference. Yes, it's a slight difference, and it came all the way down to this 7 months later. But if you want to know what the difference between a Joe Biden administration and a Donald Trump administration is, it is this. And Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham aren't even as extreme right-wing as Donald Trump is.
They're just the moderates.
Florida man and U.S. Rep. Corey Mills has even drafted articles of impeachment for President Biden over this decision.
Oh my God.
Claiming that it is the same thing as Donald Trump withholding military aid to Ukraine, even though in this instance, we are still giving Israel all of the military aid that Congress has provided for. We are just not giving them offensive weaponry. Instead, we're still providing the Iron Dome and defensive weaponry that allows Israel to conduct this kind of genocide without worrying about any kind of reprisal, as we saw when they blew up the Iranian embassy and then did not have to worry about Iran's very meager show of displeasure launching rockets and drones back at Israel. That's why they don't have to care about those reprisals, is because of the defensive weaponry that they're still getting from the US. So every dollar that's been allocated by Congress will still go to Israel. But again, reality, the Constitution, how the law works, how the government works, never been anything that Republicans are too aware of. So these articles of impeachment will not even go through, just like the investigations into Burisma and Hunter Biden and all that was supposed to end in Joe Biden's impeachment also went nowhere. So once again, a loss for House Republicans.
And speaking of stupid Republicans, let's turn our focus to Donald Trump, who has been in the news a lot lately because of his trials, I guess you could say, his multiple court cases that he has to deal with while running for president of the United States. So let's start with the classified documents case. And there it goes.
Trump-appointed Judge Eileen Cannon has postponed the trial indefinitely. He pretty much guarantees the trial will not happen before the election. It was scheduled for later this month. Judge Cannon has only presided over 4 cases that have gone to trial for a total of 14 trial days, and none of them involved classified documents. So from the start, many people were worried that she would not be able to handle this case, and it seems that they were correct. Judge Cannon has been clearly, in my opinion, biased towards Trump.
Not just yours, man.
Throughout this entire process, starting even before she was assigned this case, when she granted Trump's request for a special master to oversee the collection of documents by the Department of Justice, a ruling that was harshly overturned by the conservative 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. The first sentence from that ruling I would like to read. This appeal requires us to consider whether the district court had jurisdiction to block the United States from using lawfully seized records in a criminal investigation. The answer is no.
In their defense, that was 2 sentences.
So this is real unfortunate news because I believe this case might be the strongest that Donald Trump is currently facing, as far as I don't see any way out of this. He clearly violated the law with intent and repeatedly.
Again, Robert Hur, who is a Trump-loving Republican, had to even admit how poorly Trump handled this case.
Mm-hmm. And as this is a federal case, if Trump were to become president again, he would basically be able to just stop the Department of Justice from investigating this or even pardon himself for this, making it completely moot. So the fact that this won't happen until after the election is a huge win for Trump. And let's move to the hush money trial that is currently going on in New York.
Stormy Daniels took the stand.
Well, first, Trump was found in contempt of court for the 10th time for violating the judge's gag order. Judge Juan Merchan vowed to maybe, possibly, potentially think about jail time as a punishment.
Count to 3.
If Trump continues to blatantly disregard his gag order. In the trial, testimony this week was given by former advisor Hope Hicks, who was called by the prosecution to talk about that Access Hollywood tape, they grab them right by the, and how the fallout from that story may have led to the decision to pay for Stormy Daniels' silence to prevent further damage to Trump's campaign.
I was listening to a breakdown of her testimony, and from what I heard, at least, is that Hope Hicks's testimony was incredibly persuasive. You had somebody who basically came in and told the jury that Trump not only knew and bragged about the fact that they paid off Stormy Daniels and took care of it while he was in the White House compared to on the campaign trail in 2016.
And the main thing they're trying to set up here is that this was not something to protect his private reputation with like his family.
Now, this was for his campaign for president.
Which is what they need to show in order to get the campaign finance felonies to stick, which is the only thing that has any real consequence in this trial. And as you said, Stormy Daniels also testified about her sexual encounter with Donald Trump.
Oh, yes, she did.
We will not be talking about those details because I did not look for them because ick. Michael Cohen is expected to be called on Monday, Trump's former lawyer who already has served prison time for his involvement in this hush money payment to Stormy Daniels when the trial resumes. An update from a story last week. Kristi Noem, governor of South Dakota, once again shoots herself in the foot with her book. Took herself to the gravel pit.
See, I was going to make a joke about saying she was digging the gravel pit deeper.
Now, when I wrote this headline and I didn't fill it out yet, we weren't on the same page here. Because I wasn't talking about this tweet that you put up.
No.
I want you to read what you have got here.
So, okay, there's so much. So Kristi Noem has been on a tour lately. She's been on all the Fox News shows trying to defend herself, double down, triple down, quadruple down on her killing a puppy. I also saw, I didn't include it in the show notes, but I don't know if you saw this, Jason. She also said that she thought that someone should have killed Biden's dog, even though they rehomed it, and because he was so horribly trained that more people should be willing to kill their dogs and make the tough decisions like she would. So that we've officially moved from I am defending my decision I made to kill my own dog to we should actually shoot more dogs currently. And then a couple of days ago, she tweeted out saying, quote, "For everyone who absolutely lost their minds about my decision to shoot a dog 20 years ago, I hope you don't eat cows or pigs or chickens. At least I have the guts to look in the eyes of the animal I'm killing. Did she eat cricket?" What is happening? Oh no, cricket.
And she's quoting Zuckerberg with the kill what you eat thing. So the reason that I wanted to talk about this,
which I am happy to talk about this as well.
The pre-release versions of the book that have been out for review have included an account of Noem meeting with, for some reason, North Korea President Kim Jong-un. The passage reads, "I remember when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. I had been a children's pastor after all."
Have you seen these little dictators running around?
Right. So not only does she hate puppies, she also hates children, which at least that I can understand. But the issue is that there is no record of her meeting Kim Jong-un, which very few U.S. officials, like
and
a
Dennis
handful,
Rodman,
have done. And then her publisher announced that the passage referencing the meeting would be removed from the electronic and audio versions of the book, and also from any reprintings of physical copies. And this came just before Governor Noem went on her media tour, which you talked about.
Yep.
So not only was it the trying to explain me killing my dog tour, it was also trying to promote her now ironically named book, No Going Back. And it did not go well. So first, we have a little bit of a longer clip from Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, where she asks about that passage, meeting Kim Jong-un, which was removed from the book. And this has been slightly edited for content, and I took out some of the long pauses as well.
Did you meet Kim Jong-un?
Well, as soon as this was brought to my attention, I certainly made some changes and looked at this passage, and I've met with many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. As soon as it was brought to my attention, we went forward and have made some edits. So I'm glad that this book is being released in a couple of days and that those edits will be in place and that people will have the updated version.
So you did not meet with Kim Jong-un. That's what you're saying.
I've met with many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. I think I've talked extensively in this book about my time serving in Congress, my time as governor, before governor, some of the travels that I've had. I'm not going to talk about my specific meetings with world leaders. I'm just not going to do that. This anecdote shouldn't have been in the book, and as soon as it was brought to my attention, I made sure that that was adjusted. So the book is not released until Tuesday, and so we're doing all that we can to make sure that those changes are made, and I'm going to continue to focus on what this book is. Every single person in this country wants someone in elected office that's a human being, that doesn't say they're perfect. I take responsibility for that being in the book, and as soon as it was brought to my attention, I asked for it to be changed. So I'm glad that the release date is in a couple of days, and we're excited to talk to America about my new book, No Going Back.
So you talk about your time in the Armed Services Committee from 2013 to 2015. In that period of time, the leader of South Korea was a female president. I'm wondering, who is it that you confused Kim Jong-un with?
Well, I think you need to remember, Margaret, and everybody needs to remember that I've worked on ag policy and federal policy for over 30 years. My time in serving and making policies in this country has been extensive and covered decades.
Right, but you never went to North Korea.
I make no specifics in this book. I talk about the fact that, yes, I have. I've been there. So
you went to North Korea?
Yeah, I went to the DMZ, and there are details in this book that talk about going to the DMZ and specifics that I'm willing to share. There's some specifics I'm not willing to share with you. I've traveled the world, and I've visited with world leaders, and some of that is referenced in the book, and this anecdote is something that, when it was brought to my attention, we made some changes, and when the book's released, we'll do all that we can to see that is reflected.
Okay. Well, I'm asking about that specifically because you made the point to bring him up twice and that he was a little tyrant.
Do you have a question for me, Margaret?
Yes, I do. South Korea is a treaty ally. North Korea is a nuclear-armed adversary. So that's a pretty big thing to confuse. I know you read this book before it was published because you released video of your recording of the audiobook. You didn't catch these errors when you were recording it?
Oh, Margaret, as soon as it was brought to my attention, I took action to make sure that it was reflected. And listen, this is what is so discouraging about politics and the media today.
So then she goes on to whataboutism.
Oh, God, kill me.
Yeah, this is really the problem with the media today is how much you're attacking me over this. You never answered the question once.
Well, okay. We both looked at each other when she said it. The DMZ is not North Korea.
No, there is a gift shop at the DMZ where you can buy all sorts of DMZ memorabilia, and it's like a tourist trap. It's not where you would go to meet Kim Jong-un.
But she's met with many world leaders.
I've traveled the world.
Many world leaders.
And as soon as this was brought to my attention, we removed it. You were supposed to have written this book, right? As soon as it was brought to my attention.
Written nothing. Okay, I'm even going to give it the fact that, like, yes, these are always ghost written books, right? I even get that. And for most people who don't follow this type of stuff, they may think that she tried to write it and that's going to sound really dumb to her. But I'm sorry,
your name's on it.
I'm going to give her even that. You should have read the book.
Well, she did, right? Like they brought up in this interview, she did the audio version for the audiobook. She read the book for the audiobook. So she read that passage about Kim Jong-un.
The two passages.
There is, and it's unfortunately that we're not going to get that because that's much easier to remove. Like the print versions of the book are still going to have that in there because it's too late for them to change it now. And they said they're only going to change it on future printings. But there is audio that exists of Kristi Noem reading this. And I hope that someone
find the way
at the recording studio saves that. But okay, that did not go well. But it's Margaret Brennan. She's been a reporter for 20 years. She's a very good journalist. Yeah, okay, I could see, she's interviewed some pretty high-powered people. That might be a rough interview, but...
Well, can we just say kudos to Margaret Brennan as well? Because could you imagine, Jason, how infuriated you would be trying to actually be on her side of that interview? And again, I know this is what politicians do all the time, and this is a bad example.
But Kristi Noem literally said, we want politicians who are real people, and then just kept repeating the canned response that she was given to say to this.
Oh, God.
I've met with many world leaders. I've traveled all around the world. As soon as this was brought to my attention, we got it resolved.
But did you meet with them? Well, I met with many world leaders.
Right. I'm not going going to talk about which exact world leaders that I've met with, even though it was literally in the book that I put my name on. But let's see how well she did when talking to Good Morning America. That's like an entertainment show. They've got Nate Burleson. He does
softball questions.
Yeah,
man.
he does NFL games for Nickelodeon. This has got to go much easier for the governor of South Dakota.
That, as I understand, is now being removed from the book at your request.
Yes, when I became aware of that, we changed the content, and the future editions will be adjusted. And, I appreciate that. I've met with many, many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. I should not have put that anecdote in the book. And at my request, they have removed it.
That specific meeting didn't happen?
I'm saying that I'm not talking about that meeting. I'm not talking about my meetings with world leaders.
But you
there's
do
some
talk
that are
about
in the
meetings
book.
with world leaders.
There's some that are in the book, and then there's some that's not in the book.
But
Many of
why
them,
are there
actually.
two specific mentions of meeting Kim Jong-un and talking about him, and a specific memory? I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. Did you tell your ghostwriter to write that?
I've specifically have worked on policy for over 30 years. And over that time, I have traveled around the world, and I have met with leaders around the world. And that anecdote, I've asked them to change the content, and it will be removed.
It's a simple question. Did you or did you not meet with Kim Jong-un?
That's the answer that I have for you, is that it will be adjusted, and as soon as I became aware of it, that content was removed.
That's not good.
We want politicians who are normal people.
That's the answer I have for you. And of course, we're not stupid. That answer is no, I did not. How the person who wrote the book had that idea, probably because Kristi Noem told them that she did. And then it became very apparent that this was going to be fact-checked and would be obviously exposed as a lie. So now we don't know how it got in there. It shouldn't have got in there. I'm not saying I didn't meet with Kim Jong-un, but I'm not saying I did, because I can't talk about that. I talk about meeting other world leaders, but there's world leaders that I met with that I didn't put in there, so I'm not going to put this one in there. It's like Schrodinger's meeting. It both did and didn't. It's in a superposition of having happened and not happened at the same time. And until you open that box, you don't know which one.
Until you open the book.
So let's move on to
someone who could actually be on the ballot. Ha!
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who claims that a doctor told him that a worm ate part of his brain.
Now, this comes from the New York Times, where they dug up some old, I believe, divorce filings with RFK Jr. and his ex-wife, which apparently was supposed to be pretty messy. And this was testimony from RFK Jr. about his fogginess and lack of memory. And he blamed it on the fact that, number one, he went to the doctor because he was having some memory issues. He thought he had a tumor, and the doctor told him that that's not a tumor.
It's not a tumor.
It was actually a brain worm eating a part of his brain and then dying in his head.
And actually, I don't know if this violates any kind of doctor-patient confidentiality. I don't know why they kept this recording, but this is breaking news, we have the actual audio from the doctor of when he found this inside Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s head. So exclusive to our podcast and to our listeners, here you go.
Poor little guy starved to death.
I intentionally didn't look at that clip because I was curious what you were going to put.
I think it's the obvious one.
Oh, that's good. I always appreciate a good Futurama reference.
I don't know what you're talking about. Actual, real audio of Robert Kennedy's doctor finding the dead worm in his brain.
Look, man, I don't know how to feel about this story because on top of that, he also, I guess, was diagnosed with mercury poisoning. That was another thing that's not being covered as much because brain worms are the cool new thing to talk about nowadays.
But that also does deteriorate your brain.
Right, with long-lasting effects. I don't know, man. If it was like you who told me that you had a brain worm, I don't think I'd be laughing. I'd feel bad for you. And I want to feel bad for RFK Jr. But the fact that this guy has killed so many people with his anti-vax rhetoric and is now running for president, I can't think of a better RFK Jr. fact if I tried.
He's not a real anti-vaxxer according to Donald Trump, though.
No, because now finally Donald Trump's thinking that RFK Jr. is starting to infringe on his turf.
Right, something that we had talked about for a while now, that he's actually a spoiler candidate most likely to take votes away from Trump rather than Joe Biden because he is such a right-wing figure at this point.
So Trump actually took aim at him, I think via, was it True Social, I think it was?
I think that's the only place he posts anything anymore.
Point taken. Calling RFK Jr. a fake anti-vaxxer.
Not like the real anti-vaxxer Donald Trump. How far has our society fallen that in order to be considered a viable conservative candidate,
there's a gatekeeping test of how anti-vax you are?
Yeah, you have to be anti-vax. That's wild. I did not think that we would ever go to this point.
Hey, you know what though, man? Parties are basically the same.
Is
can't really tell.
Joseph Mercola going to be the next Republican candidate for president? I don't know. I think that's where we're going.
Sorry, Bobby.
Literally the only reason I wanted to do that story was just for that audio clip. So that's really all I have to say.
That's all I got too.
M&Ms will not be satisfied until every last cartoon character is deeply unappealing and totally androgynous. Until the moment you wouldn't want to have a drink with any one of them. That's the goal. When you're totally turned off, they've won.
Boy ain't right.
For Fox in the Head this week, Jason, sometimes with Fox in the Head, we get stories that are just so obvious we're going to obviously put them in our script for this segment. Sometimes we need to do a little Googling and searching. Hey, let's see what we can find this week. Have you ever had the feeling where you just found a video and just went, oh, I found it. We struck gold.
It has happened from time to time, yes.
Well, I think I found it. Britt Cooper of the Daily Wire and totally not Ben Shapiro's little sister is super upset that the Boy Scouts have now changed their name to Scouting America. The Boy Scouts of America recently announced they will be rebranding to Scouting America to be more inclusive and welcoming to the 100,000 so girls who are actually in the Scouts right now. And of course, conservatives everywhere lost their collective minds.
And this is something they've been doing for some time, right? 2017, I think?
Yeah, it's like, to be completely honest, and I actually ran out of time as I wasn't able to look into this. Didn't we already do this? I specifically have memories, like of 2016, 2017, when the Boy Scouts were going to drop it, the Boy Scouts, and then start letting Girl Scouts in and start being known as like Scouts of America instead of Boy Scouts of America.
It was like Scouts like BSA or something. Like they were still going to have it in there, but it was just going to be an acronym.
Right.
I don't know if we covered it, but I do remember the story. There was actually a lawsuit by the Girl Scouts because they were trying to say that it would cause confusion. There was a settlement in that case. The boys and Girl Scouts came to an agreement, and then now this is them moving forward. And they're going to do this name change next year.
But Brett Cooper is not having any of this. She also gave us one of the most confusing takes I think I've heard on this story so far. So let's just listen how she introduces the story to her listeners on her show.
So I might have mentioned this to you guys before, but when I was a kid, I desperately wanted to be a Boy Scout. I mean, all three of my brothers are Eagle Scouts. My parents were Scout leaders and Cub Scout leaders. Like I grew up in that world. Everything they did sounded so much fun. You know, they would come home for the camping trips. I just like desperately wanted to go. And you know, as a tomboy, I wanted to camp. I wanted to backpack. I wanted to rock climb and start fires, build things, not craft and just sell Thin Mints, which in my area, that's really all the Girl Scouts focused on. I know that there are other chapters that did amazing, very cool things. But in Chattanooga, Tennessee, the chapter at that time was not what I was interested in. But of course, because I was a girl, joining the Boy Scouts was not an option. Obviously, duh. My mom was like, suck it up, babe. There's nothing you can do. But then, just a few years later, the Boy Scouts announced that they would be accepting girls into the program. And not just girls who thought they were boys. No, regular girls. And now, in 2024, they have gone a step further. They have removed boys from the name altogether. So they announced this yesterday on their X account, saying, the Boy Scouts of America today announced that it will be rebranding to Scouting America, reflecting the organization's ongoing commitment to welcoming every youth and family in America to experience the benefits of scouting. And here's their new logo, Scouting America. Ah, yes, inclusivity, the name of the game. That is the name of the game in 2024. I mean, it's crazy that having gendered spaces for both men and women equally is just not good enough. That is not inclusive enough. No, I'm so sorry. Let's just blur all the lines. Let's make it all genderless so that it's all inclusive.
It's funny because she says it herself. This happened years ago, that they actually were allowing girls to become scouts. They're just now changing the name.
Yep.
Well, look at 2024. Can't have any exclusive gendered spaces.
But
This happened 7 years ago.
I can't get over. She starts the story, Jason.
Right. As a test case for why it should happen.
Right. Is saying, I was a girl and I wanted to do all these things that my brothers were doing. And I couldn't because I was not allowed to because I was a girl. And all I could do as a girl was be a Girl Scout where all they did was sell cookies all day long.
And craft.
And
that's, you want to know why? Because you're from Tennessee and those gender norms are heavily enforced there.
Right. But like, she should want this then. You have the story. You have the experience. Did you not hear yourself?
Right. And then only a few years later, they allowed girls to be in the Boy Scouts. You could have been one of those girls that got to go camping and climb rocks or whatever she thinks that she only want to do because she's a tomboy.
I don't know, man. So let's hear exactly what Britt's problem is with this new name change.
And not just because it's 2024, which seemed to be her only complaint previously.
Now, in their official press release, they offered some more clarifying information, which newsflash did not clarify anything at all. Did not help the situation in the slightest. But they said this announcement also comes as the organization celebrates the 5th anniversary of welcoming girls into Cub Scouting and Scouts BSA programs. Scouting America currently serves more than 172,000 girls and young women across all programs, including over 6,000 who have earned the rank of Eagle Scout. And I'm like, it grinds my gears because on principle, I know that this is wrong. Women should not be Eagle Scouts because Boy Scouts are for boys, but I'm so jealous also because I wanted to be one. And my mother would have never let me, but I'm angry at the whole situation. Whatever, you guys are going to think that's ridiculous. This will be a simple but very important evolution as we seek to ensure that everyone feels welcome in scouting. Everyone did feel welcome. That's why this is so ridiculous. There was boy and girl scouts. Like, I feel like I'm living in the Twilight Zone. None of this makes sense. It is really not that complicated. You are twisting yourself up to appease ridiculous people that hate you. Don't do that. I mean, this should be common sense. And if you were a girl like me who was more of a tomboy and wanted to do rough and tumble things with the boys, and your local Girl Scout chapter didn't offer that, you just wouldn't join. And you would suck it up and you would deal with it because that's life, and things often don't go like you plan.
What a roller coaster.
She never offered an argument why there shouldn't be a co-ed scouting group. What does she think happens on these camping trips? Like, I went to camp, like summer camp as a kid.
Yep.
And there were both boys and girls there.
Yep.
And nobody died, and there weren't like wild camp orgies.
Like that,
you had separate bunks.
That's one thing that I've been seeing a lot, where you have all these people like, you can't have Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts together. You know what's going to happen, right? I'm like, do you know how old these people are? They're like 7 to 9. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I'm not sure. I only did 1 year of Boy Scouts, and I don't remember what the cutoff is for Cub Scouts versus Boy Scouts and that kind of thing. But yeah, you're still not, like, you have chaperones, and it's not like you're kids, right? You are kids.
But even Britt acknowledges that there were, I think there's like 170,000 girls throughout the country that are already in this program.
And I guess it's 5 years, not 7 years, like I thought. But
6,000 of them already obtained Eagle Scout status.
Right.
Like, what are we doing anymore at this point? Like, why are you freaking out? There's already girls doing this.
And have been.
And
it's not been the end of civilization.
And I loved her argument, which was like, and it makes me so angry that girls are Eagle Scouts because I know deep down that Eagle Scouts are for boys.
Right.
I'm like,
that's not an argument.
But why though?
Right.
Why? And then you literally say that girls who want to do this stuff should just be okay with not being welcomed right after you said, but everyone's already welcomed. What is going on?
Yeah, if you're a girl, you should just not get to have these kinds of activities available to you. And that's fine. You should just be happy with it because sometimes life isn't fair. But we can make it fair.
We can.
Like, very easily.
And this isn't even
and
like
it doesn't hurt anyone.
Right. And this isn't even like the woke mob coming in and telling the Boy Scouts what to do. This is the Boy Scouts of America changing it on their own. Like, I'm getting real Dr. Seuss vibes back from when that was a big controversy. Like, this is them choosing to do it. This is the free market.
Mm-hmm. And it is probably a capitalist decision. We need to allow both, then we can start pulling from the Girl Scouts, which notoriously they make so much money with the Girl Scout cookies. So they can start pulling from them. They probably have a much less overall numbers
They've been
have
declining.
to. Yeah, because, I mean, it's corny these days, right? To be in the Boy Scouts. It was starting to get that way when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just a strategy in order to keep existing. Oh, this woke leftists ruining the Boy Scouts.
By letting girls play.
How dare they?
Jason, this goes on for 8 more minutes. I need you to understand that. We could have had a whole episode on this 10-minute video.
Right.
Because all she does is go on after this to talk about why, like, this is why she also hates women in sports and, like, men's sports in general. Not even, like, transgender women in sports. We're talking about just, like, the couple of women who are, like, doing football at the collegiate level. She hates that. And it's like,
of course.
What are we doing?
Did you ever criticize the Boy Scouts for trying to cover up all of the sexual abuse that they did for years? And that actually probably led them to the position that they're in right now.
No.
No, none of that, huh? Just about letting girls in.
God forbid, man. And she wanted to be one of them, and she's so upset about it. Oh, I can't get over this. They're so stupid, Jason. They're so dumb.
And why wouldn't Ben Shapiro's mom let her join the Boy Scouts? I don't understand.
Sorry, now I'm just picturing like a teenage Ben Shapiro lecturing at like his little sister about why she can't be in a Boy Scouts.
Because Eagle Scouts are for boys. It's the Boy Scouts, all right? Don't you understand? Get it through your thick little skull of yours.
They're only male eagles.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it? It's hard to get any word in with this clown.
So let's talk about our main segment today. Law and order and understanding that we need to be worried about people stealing our stuff.
So you probably heard a lot about retail theft.
I have.
Especially in the lead up to the midterm elections.
It's all these gangs that are coming in and terrorist organizations that are coming in and stealing our, shoplifting something.
There were all sorts of news reports and videos of gangs of thugs smashing display cases and ransacking retailers like Walgreens, who were also cutting staff and raising prices during a pandemic. And those stories were eagerly repeated by the local and national news outlets, eager to convert that fear, the sensational nature of those video clips, into clicks and views on their websites and news programs. But what you may have not heard much about is the estimated $50 billion a year that is stolen from working people by their employers every year.
And just for comparison, according to the 2019 FBI crime statistics, in a certain year, robberies are responsible for about $380 million worth of property stolen every year. Burglaries are responsible for $2.4 billion. Larceny theft, like pickpocketing, shoplifting, basically the things that Jason was just telling you about, was responsible for $4.8 billion. And vehicle thefts were responsible for about $5.4 billion. Which, the big thing about this, I want to make sure I'm clear because I want to be misconstrued at all. Those are big numbers and they're worth being known about. I think that's something that's worth addressing. With that said, all of those combined make up a quarter of the amount stolen every year via wage theft. Think about that for just a little bit. Just 1/4 of what people get stolen from by their employers every single year is all other theft. Take, for example, the story that even inspired this segment. Providence Health System in Washington. In 2021, 33,000 nurses, technicians, medical assistants, and other hourly employees filed a class action lawsuit against Providence Health System, claiming their employers willfully stole millions of dollars through illegal timekeeping practices. Well, last April, the court found that Providence stole approximately $98 million from its employees, not some chump change. However, because the court found ample evidence that this was intentional theft, the court ordered Providence to pay about $200 million to its employees. And here's how Providence stole nearly $100 million from its employees. The complaint centers around the company's, quote, rounding policy and meal break procedures. What is this rounding policy? Well, let me tell you. According to the complaint, Providence would pay its hourly workers based on time worked rounded to the nearly 15-minute increment. The attorney representing the employees used this example during court hearings. Quote, if a staffer were to clock in at 6:53 a.m. for a 7 a.m. shift, the timekeeping system would report their time as 7 a.m. and pay them accordingly. If they clocked out after their scheduled time, the system would also round them back to the nearest 15-minute increment. Even though the company used an electronic timekeeping system that tracked their work down to the second, they still kept this policy with purpose. This purpose was to eventually steal or screw people out $9.3 million worth of wages meant to be paid out. Now, as you probably just noticed, there's still a lot of leftover money to be accounted for here in this lawsuit. And that's because the other $90 million were found from the company's meal break policies. By Washington state law, employers must provide employees 2 30-minute meal breaks when they work more than 10 hours straight. And as a son of a nurse, I fully comprehend how often medical staff needs to work over 10-hour shifts. On paper, Providence gave employees their 2 meal breaks. However, what the company actually did was have their timekeeping system automatically deduct the meal breaks from the employee's pay, whether they used them or not. The jury found that the company automatically reduced pay for employees for meal breaks and then aggressively pressured those same employees to not take those breaks. And man, I don't know about you, but that is like uber next level Disney villain crap.
And I don't even think it's that uncommon.
No, I don't think so either.
And especially this rounding to the nearest 15 minutes, I'm pretty sure that I've worked for a place that's done that.
Ew, I don't like that. And before you get super excited thinking this was a victory for the employees, which, I mean, it was, so good for them, here's the bad news. Attorneys representing Providence recently said this in a statement. This case presented several new and complex wage and hour issues that are not addressed in Washington state statutes or by the Washington Courts of Appeal. Along with other employers also seeking clarity on these Washington wage and hour issues, we intend to appeal this result. So they are appealing it. And God forbid what happens next and how long it'll actually take. I also just want to include here as well some other quotes from Monsignor Robert Soler, the Episcopal vicar and chancellor in the Diocese of Yakima, told Religion News Services that the diocese was limiting its comments due to Providence appeal, but said that, quote, overall, we believe Providence cares deeply for its employees and that Providence's employees benefit from a robust union representation. He goes on to say, given the many challenges facing Catholic healthcare, because God forbid this is also a Catholic institution, we pray for a just outcome and a continued focus by both labor and management on Providence's mission to serve everyone, especially the poor and vulnerable. Screw off.
We pray for a just outcome. We're still going to appeal it with our lawyer.
Right. Again, Disney level villains.
Well, if this was the worst thing that a Catholic diocese ever did,
right,
I'd be happy.
But that's just one example.
Yeah, that's one example.
Just one example.
Wage theft can take many forms. One of the most common is minimum wage violations, paying workers less than the legal minimum wage. There's overtime violations, failing to pay non-exempt employees time and a half for hours worked in excess of 40 hours per week. Off-the-clock violations, asking employees to work off the clock before or after their shifts. When I was working at Time Warner Cable, there was a class action lawsuit out of Denver for the Time Warner Cable office there trying to do this. Your shift starts the time that you're scheduled to start, so we want you to be here, have your computer booted up and ready to go at that time. So people were having to come in 10-15 minutes early to be able to get in their seats, get their computers turned on, get logged into everything, and they weren't being paid for that time.
Right.
That is illegal.
That is illegal.
That is wage theft. That case was won by the employees. Meal break violations, like we talked about, denying workers their legal meal breaks or not paying them for their breaks. Pay stub and illegal deductions, taking illegal deductions from wages or not distributing pay stubs. Tipped minimum wage violations, confiscating tips from workers or failing to pay tipped workers the difference between their tips and the legal minimum wage. Employee misclassification violations, misclassifying employees as independent contractors to pay a wage lower than the legal minimum. A study done by the Economic Policy Institute using data from just minimum wage violations in 2013 to 2015, so those 3 years, in just the 10 most populous states, California, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Michigan, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Texas, found that 159,000 workers were pushed below the poverty line due to wage theft, and over 800,000 wage theft victims received some form of public assistance. So that means not only are these companies that make millions or billions of dollars off of these employees stealing their wages, it is also up to the public to subsidize those employees with public assistance. And this is something that gets talked about a lot about Walmart, that, you know, Walmart makes billions of dollars, but yet a majority of their workforce, their non-executive workforce, is on public assistance because they don't get paid anything.
And you want to know what company has over $1 billion in payments from wage theft cases? Walmart.
So they are stealing money from their workers, not paying their workers living wages, and their workforce is basically being subsidized by the government while they make all of the profits.
Yep. And of course, this would affect everybody the exact same, because we live in an equal meritocracy that people who deserve to get the money will, and justly so.
And because this does affect the lowest income people more,
I just don't believe you.
It also is most likely to affect women, people of color, low-wage workers, immigrant workers, and workers with less education and fewer resources, just making the poor poorer.
Basically. And also broadening the typical divides you see in gender and racial disparities. So when people talk about, again, you have to keep saying it, when people talk about systemic racism or the patriarchy, this is the crap we're talking about, where if you have systems that affect people disproportionately based on the societies we live in, that is a bad thing that we need to fix and address. And to make matters worse is that wage theft cases can usually take years to finish. Just look at that Providence healthcare system example we discussed earlier. That took several years. And these cases aren't simply a few $100s either. An analysis of 650,000 wage claims by CBS investigative reporters, which we'll include in the show notes, found nearly 30,000 cases where $10,000 or more was owed to the employee. And man, I don't know about you, but $10,000 could make a ton of difference in my life.
159,000 workers were pushed below the poverty line due to wage theft. So that is the difference between poverty and being above the poverty line, not being poor, not starving, is this money that is being stolen by an employer. And, you know, the employers, as we talk about systems and everything else, employers are given like a special class in this country. You hear it all the time. Like, oh, they're the producers. They're the ones that are job creators.
Well, we even classify this differently as in like white collar crime.
Right. Well, none of this we're talking about, all of this is just paying back what they're being owed. Luckily, Washington has a system where you can actually get more. The penalties were double what the actual theft was. In most states, it's not even 1-to-1.
Correct.
You get less than what it's actually incentivized for businesses to try to get away with wage theft if they can, because even if they're caught, they don't pay back as much as they actually owe. And that's the system we live in. And it's disgusting. And, you know, these businesses, they get all the tax breaks. They get everything. No one, you don't have the Republicans out here complaining about, you know, these welfare queen businesses out here getting all the subsidies, not paying any taxes. They're treated like they're a special classification. Meanwhile, they are committing more crime and a higher value of crime than everyone else in the country combined.
Right, exactly. You don't see Republicans putting ads out about all of the supposed theft regarding law and order stuff, right?
Yeah, no ominous music.
It's always people of color breaking into a building somewhere saying, they're coming for you, they're coming for you. When in reality, they already came for you.
Right.
You're just angry at the wrong people.
And steal money out of the register at your place of employment, you will end up in jail. Not only will you have to pay that money back, you will then owe the state and the county thousands of dollars. You will lose your job. Your
life's gone.
Yeah, you'll be in jail for months, if not years. But yet these corporations steal hundreds of millions of dollars and they have to pay a fine. They have to pay some of that money back. And there's never any criminal violations that come out of this. Like, look at the trial right now with Donald Trump. $130,000 illegally paid out. All of this fraudulent paperwork set up. We're not talking about any real criminal liability in this case. And that's what we mean. White collar crime is not thought of as crime in America, but yet it destroys more lives, does more harm, steals more value than any other type of crime.
And I'm going to make this even worse for you, Jason, because that same analysis also found that even those who do end up succeeding and winning their cases, many of those employees still don't see the money anyway. Of those 650,000 cases the CBS team analyzed, more than a third of those successful cases, totaling over $1 billion, showed that no money was ever returned. That could be because of delaying tactics or appealing processes or just simply no enforcement.
Right, or financial loopholes, companies going out of business, things like that, and never paying these employees and literally ruining their lives.
And I didn't really know where to put that, but I'm actually glad you said it that way because that was a weirdly good segue. Because I've also found a study from the National Institute of Health that also found that stopping wage theft has also been linked to increasing life expectancy of low-income people. Now, that's probably not shocking either, but just to go over this study, they ran multiple simulations of different scenarios regarding different levels of stopping wage theft and how that would deal with poor earners throughout the country. They found that for low-income individuals, it can increase life expectancies by 17%, and that would be nearly 13-year increases based on the U.S. average life expectancy of a 76-year-old person.
And that makes sense. Usually when you're in this situation, you're not getting your healthcare through these employers. So being able to get your $300-400 a month that is being stolen from you, you could put that towards private health insurance or at least paying for a few doctor visits. So yeah, it's not that crazy to me.
So what's being done? Cities, counties, states, and the federal government all have different wage theft claims processes, which is not a good thing. There's a story actually about Santa Clara County having to start up their own county enforcement system because the state of California was so backed up that it would take years just to process and begin these claims for people in the state.
Yeah, the CBS story that they did that we're referencing here is primarily about California, and it came from this Santa Clara County, the reporters that basically got this story to CBS.
I believe they said it was something almost 2 years it took to process a claim of wage theft in California.
It was over a year. I think by law,
it was like 550 or 550 days or something like that.
By law, it was supposed to be like 130 days, something, and it was like triple that.
What's even more problematic is that states such as Alabama and Florida don't even have any statewide processes to address these claims.
Jeez, I can't imagine why.
And to make it even worse, states like Alabama, Mississippi, North Dakota, and Tennessee don't have any laws giving employees wage protections.
These horrible, crime-ridden Democrats. Oh, wait, no. These are all Southern Republican states. Well, other than
not
North
Southern,
Dakota.
but yeah.
Good job, North Dakota, being the only one that doesn't fit that. But yeah, these are all, as you probably expect, Republican. Although we did say California is terrible.
Right.
At least they do have laws in place.
At least they're doing something.
But they just can't keep up with the number of claims.
Former Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh said in an interview, "When you're in different states, you shouldn't handle it different ways. And if you happen to live in the state of Illinois, you happen to live in the state of California, or live in the state of Massachusetts, you might have some great wage laws on the books that can help you recoup your money."
What is the connection there between those three states?
They're all communist.
All across the country.
But if you live in some of these other states that aren't as top of the priority list, that's unfortunate because a lot of those states that, don't put wage theft as a top priority. Those are the states that people are really being abused and losing their wages. Now, like we said before, some cities are doing a good job at enforcing wage claims and revoking business licenses if wages are not repaid properly. That story we talked about earlier, but Santa Clara County has a 100% success rate where they actually didn't have to revoke anyone's business licenses. They just had to threaten to do so, but at least it worked.
In states that do have wage theft laws, wage theft is treated less severely than other theft cases. No surprise. For example, in Illinois, wage theft up to $5,000 is treated as a Class B misdemeanor. However, in the same state, property theft worth more than $500 is considered a felony with a sentence up to 5 years. 69% of wage theft cases in Illinois that CBS looked at were above that threshold, but the vast majority of those were considered misdemeanors.
And again, that's a commie state like Illinois.
Right. And even the fact that it is considered a misdemeanor at all is surprising to me, and that I think you'd only see that in a more progressive state. What is the answer to this problem? As always, government regulation.
Because you're a commie.
Well, if I was a communist, then I would say
no wages.
We just take over the businesses.
We just don't have wages
and
anymore.
Give them to these employees, and then there's not going to be any more wage theft. In 2022, Representative Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut introduced the Wage Theft Prevention and Wage Recovery Act, and will even include the fact sheet from the committee Democrats. This act would enforce multiple record-keeping standards for employers, make employers provide employees with regular pay stubs, such crazy socialism, set a time limit on when the final payment for an employee can be processed after they leave, which is another big thing when it comes to wage theft, is trying to do everything to withhold an employee's final paycheck. It would also increase the penalties for those who commit wage theft, but of course, it never went anywhere, even in a completely Democratic-controlled House, Senate, and presidency. Now that that is no longer the case, has no chance of even making it through the House.
Yep. So if you want something to do, and usually I don't want to even give this because I'm so nihilistic when it comes to actually talking to your representatives, this is something that you could definitely reach out to your representatives about. And not just your Congress people. Yes, you should also do your Congress people. But if you want to make the most impact, reach out to your state and local officials about this. Make sure they know what's going on and make sure they know that they can do something at the local level and should do something at the local level, because the higher up you go, the less reliable it is.
Yeah, the next time you get that phone call asking you to donate to somebody's campaign,
give it to us instead.
Tell them that you want to see legislation for wage theft, that this is a huge issue. It's a much bigger issue than retail theft. It's a much bigger issue than vehicle theft. It costs average working class Americans every year, and it's something that is not being addressed. If a candidate says that they're a law and order candidate, ask them if that only applies to minorities or if it also would apply to corporations and businesses that steal from their employees.
Right. If there was any statistic I just want you to leave this episode with, again, it's the all of other theft sums up to a quarter of what wage theft is responsible for each and every year. I need you to understand that, and you cannot let anybody get away with fear-mongering about shoplifting and stealing cars and whatnot if they're not even going to begin talking about this. And I'm going to go super rebellious here and say, and hold your fellow Democrats responsible as well, because while many Democrats will probably say, well, of course I'm against wage theft, they're not pushing this hard enough. They don't know the actual specifics on what to do with this either. And usually, because I also have experience with this as well, just because something is democratically ran does not mean it's being ran well either. Make sure that your democratically run systems are also properly and efficiently taking care of these claims in a timely manner. And if not, you should make sure your representatives are doing something about it. So not the most uplifting episode.
They never are.
But I think something worth knowing.
Mm-hmm. And as we go, we'd just like to say Happy Mother's Day. That is going to be going on this weekend.
Happy post-Mother's Day.
And we will see you all next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope to see you in the next episode. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at ThinkProPod. You can email us at thinkpropod@gmail.com. And remember, when in doubt, think progressively.
We've seen a ferocious surge. That's harder than I thought it'd be. We've seen
Joe Biden can say it.
Damn it. We've seen a ferocious Monsignor Robert Sealair, the Episcopal vicar? Is it vicar?
It's Monsignor and Episcopal vicar. And chancellor.
Did I say Monsignor right?
You Frenched it up more than necessary.
Are you saying I shouldn't French up the word Monsignor?
Yeah, it
sounds racist. I also wanted to include
Washington, Joe.